really trying to establish approaches and thinking and areas of the business which at the end of the day allow you to outcompete your rivals or to defend against other organizations, other competitors. So this is most certainly a focus of the for-profit private sector. It's relevant in a lot of ways to the nonprofit sector, the higher ed sector, the healthcare sector. You know, everybody in this day and age is facing competitive pressures in one form or fashion. But there's a level of aggression to it, which, by the way, can make some people very uncomfortable because companies will do things that are in their best interest. It is very profit driven. So when we outcompete our rivals, we can earn a higher level of profitability, right? So it's like building a war chest. So we want to understand that principle and that thinking. When you approach some of this material, you almost have to step out of it from your own personal beliefs and thinking for a moment, right? Because there are things that companies are doing because they are in their best interest. They are not necessarily in the best interest of society and the individual and all that, although we're going to talk about that stuff too, because there are many, many organizations who have found that actually thinking about those other stakeholders is beneficial to everybody, right? So competitive strategy starts with setting a strategy. And we do this through a couple of different types of analysis. And analysis is a key word, right? So this is not a finance class. We're not typically going to build spreadsheets. You know, there might be a few things that you could run a couple numbers, but it is analysis nonetheless. And that's actually one of the, I think, more complex things about strategy and strategic analysis is you're looking at data and you're trying to connect dots and find meaning. So the first thing that we look at is the external environment. So it's the world outside of the organization. It might even be the world outside of the industry that you're operating in, right? So if you think about, because many of us are in the higher ed space, it's really easy to think about these examples, right? We are a North Park nonprofit institution, but at the end of the day, we need to make money, right? Otherwise, we can't pay the salaries of all the people. And we can't offer scholarships and those sorts of things to our students. If you think about the higher ed industry, there's a ton of competitive pressure. So MOOCs, massively online, open, whatever they're called, right? And some of them are free. The Khan Academy. These are organizations which are creating competitive pressure. Online education has placed great pressure on face-to-face education, right? So these are external to our institution, right? And some of that pressure is coming from outside the higher ed industry per se. So we have to look outside, right? And then we look inside. And we have to think about ourselves and what we do well and what are the capabilities that we have and what are the resources that we have. And what's sort of the stuff that makes us special, right? So in analyzing those things, we can then figure out by what means we create a competitive advantage. How is it that we can outcompete other organizations? How can we defend against organizations that might enter our industry? Why do we care about that? Because companies want to grow, right? They want to grow, they want to increase profitability, they want to hire new employees, right? Expand their opportunities. And public companies who have shares want to increase their share price, make their shareholders wealthy, right? So these are the goals. The fifth step is putting it all in place, right? So until we get to this point, we're planning, we're analyzing, right? And then at some level, everybody in the organization has to do stuff. They have to do their job. So you have people in human capital that are hiring and bringing in new talent and, you know, setting policies and setting compensation. And then you have people in finance that are analyzing the business, and then you have people in operations that are bringing the product to market. You have people in technology, right? Everybody's doing stuff. And ideally, if they're doing it well, it's all aligned to the strategy. Very, very simple. Now, along the way, there are some very specific tactics that companies can invoke to advance their strategy. So they can acquire another company. Any of you been a part of a acquisition? Yeah, super fun, right? Eileen? Yeah, but the idea is you buy capabilities or you buy cost efficiencies. You also buy a lot of headaches many times. Outsourcing certain types of operations, right? So there's a number of different things that organizations can do that helps them advance their strategy. Now, for our purposes, the last thing that we're going to deal with is a set of contemporary topics, right? So everything 1 through 6, this area of competitive strategy, strategic management, the articles that I have you guys reading, I mean, this stuff has been in place for decades. It's like law. It's like gravity. But as organizations evolve and thinking evolves and business research evolves, there are things that arise. And so one of the things that we'll do is explore a few of those areas, because we want to be grounded in a lot of the fundamentals, but we also want to be very aware of kind of the contemporary issues that organizations are facing, right? So if you think about the 7 weeks of the class, they kind of high level break down into those different elements, okay? Now, by some simplicity, I want to take you guys through a little bit of what's in Canvas and talk about how that translates into what we're going to be doing. So hopefully you guys have had a chance to kind of log in and take a tour. I use Canvas very heavily. Just FYI, anything that we're reading should be out there, some guidance. All the assignments will be submitted through Canvas. All my announcements, most of them are correct. Clearly today they were not. Do you guys get emails when I post an announcement? Okay, fantastic. And if you guys, if you're an app person, the Canvas app is really nice. I love it. Because even when you guys send me an email through Canvas, it pings me. It's great. But, this is your central repository. So each of these modules is more or less set up for each of the weeks of the class. All right. Now, there's some unusual things in here where you guys are going to have to pay a little bit of attention to the details because of the timing, the way that the assignments flow. So in this assignments tab, you can see the major assignments of the class, the different categories of them, right? So each week, I have you guys do a short quiz, all right? Yes, my motivation is to make sure you're reading the articles. You should get 10 out of 10 on the quizzes. If you find, I think it's 10 out of 10 or 20 out of 20. 10 out of 10. If you find that there's a quiz that was a little bit of a disaster, please email me. For a variety of reasons, I might be willing to let you redo the quiz. I've had people apparently step on the return button, or their dog has stepped on the return button, or their child has hit the return button. The quizzes are not intended to penalize you, so please do not let the quiz scores penalize you in the class. But repeated sort of requests, that will be met with some pushback on my part. All right, so, yeah.
The quizzes are timed when you log in.
Does it say that?
Well, it starts a timer. I don't know if there's a maximum time.
There should not be a maximum time. They may be.
It is a counter that starts counting.
I think it's just,
what was going on with that.
Maybe it's just there to bug you.
Right.
And
By the
it says
way,
you can have repeated attempts, but there's no, until you just made that, and that just told
I think
us.
I have to reset it.
I thought there would be another repeat.
In all disclosure, we're still figuring out Canvas. Like, I'm still learning along the way. There are many things that I contact the COE team and I'm like, help me figure this out. There shouldn't be a timing on the quiz. There shouldn't be a repeat, but I'll go in and check it. They're typically due on Sundays, right? So the idea is throughout the course of the week, you guys are reading the material. The quizzes are very like core concepts. The other thing that's kind of nice about them is it helps you focus in the readings. All right, so those are on your own. Do them. There's also a set of weekly summaries. And in a way, the weekly summary, what it allows you to do is to reflect on the materials that we've been talking about and then to convey them so that I can see what you're thinking about the materials. Okay? They will involve the readings, some of the cases that we're doing. They're short, they're 15 points. No reason you guys should not kill it, right? And usually in the first week, I will give you some feedback. Like I'm looking for a little bit more depth. I'm looking for more pulling in things. There's a rubric for all of these, so feel free to read it. But they're really, like in a way, if you guys will think about this, rather than an assignment for the academic purpose of the class, think about it really as your way to communicate to me what you understand about the materials that we're working with, okay? And at the end of this, you have kind of a summary of all of these different, strategic tools, strategic analysis. All right, so those are fairly straightforward, I think. I'm not an absolutist in terms of timelines and deadlines. I've always been kind of hardcore about that stuff. I'm a student myself right now. I'm doing my doctorate actually at DePaul. I'm constantly late on my assignments, so I feel like I can't hold you guys to a bar that I don't hold myself to. But please try to be attentive. And the case deadlines are going to be more particular than some of these other things, right? Everybody's got work and family and stuff. And I have a degree of flexibility, but try not to make it a habit, all right?
Are weekly summaries due on Sunday as well?
They are typically due Mondays.
Okay,
Mondays, right? So this is week 1. It'll be due Monday, okay? And that's where the timing of the assignments, it's helpful. I try to create some consistency. Now, the case studies, all right? This is the heart and soul of our class. This is the meat. This is where you guys are going to apply the things that you're reading, all right? And there's 2 parts, okay? So every case has something called a case analysis, and then we have a case summary. And this is how it works. So we're going to first read about Toms, the shoe people, okay? I give you some very specific questions to address in the case analysis. You are going to do this in a team. Probably teams of 3 or 4. So be thinking about this, because ideally you're going to want to figure some of this out ASAP, like tonight perhaps. The case analysis, think about it as the working document, right? I'm giving you some very specific questions. You're going to go into the case, you're going to extract content, and you're going to put it onto the page in an organized fashion that reflects the frameworks that we're learning about. So Tom's is a lot about mission and values and kind of driving it operationally into the organization. And there's a few other things, but at the end of the day. So we're going to read some stuff about mission and values and all that stuff. And it's ideal to put some of the things in your case analysis together that represent what you've read in the articles. Okay? That connection is really important. Like, I need to see the evidence from your readings and the facts from the case. That's what I'm trying to have you put together. And it's not for my purposes. It's because if you guys were doing this for your organizations, that's what people would expect. But it's kind of think about it as kind of a working document. I'm not necessarily looking for accuracy, because you guys you're doing this like with training wheels on the bike. But I'm looking for attempts to kind of apply the analysis and the frameworks. So those are due like the Sunday. So it's due, the Tom's case will be due like the Sunday at the end of week 2. There's a different part due Thursday. Yes, right? So essentially, and I'll give you guys some further tips about this. What I like is for a period of time for you to kind of read the case, potentially reread the case. There's no reason not to read it once or twice. And they're short enough that you can do that. And then you're going to be doing this in your team, and you guys have some time to kind of go back and forth with your team members. If you can do it on the phone, strongly encourage that. Email, a lot harder. Divide and conquer, not my favorite, because then you guys aren't getting a chance to kind of work with all this stuff. So really think about it and how you can do that, right? Then, once you put that together, I try my best, it's not always the case, but I really try my best to get those graded for you like almost end of day Monday, certainly by Tuesday. I grade them very quickly. I do read them thoroughly, but I grade them quickly. Then that following Thursday is when the summary is due. Right? The summary is a little different. Right? The summary is like an executive summary. It's as if the management team of Tom's wants a readout of your assessment of the key question. So each one of the cases has a key question. And so in your summary, you make some really tight synopsis of your analysis, and then I have the question, and you do the pro side of the question and the con side of the question, or the yes side of the question and the no side of the question. And then the last part of the summary is which of those sides does your team support? Right? So the summaries are positions, right? So if I said to you guys, should North Park open a facility in downtown Chicago for people that work in the loop? That's a question, right? So you would do some analysis of it, get some data, collect some data, right? Put it together, and then we do a summary. Here's the summary of my analysis. Yes, they should open. Here's the pros of opening that. No, they shouldn't open. Here's the cons of it. Our position is yes. Our position is no, for these reasons. Right? So think of the summary as like an executive summary with an answer to the question. Yes.
Would we not have to write the pro and con, both of them?
Yes. Yes.
And then you choose one.
Then you choose one. So what logistically we do, every case you guys are going to pick one person on your team to be the case leader. Project manager, person who's going to drive it, right? And that person for the case analysis is going to make sure that the logistics are set up and that the team is sort of on track and focused. Also, that person can be a contact with me, a conduit. So whatever questions the team has, you can come to me. And that way it helps me a little bit, because not that I don't mind answering 15 different questions, but I'm a lot more effective if I have a person, right? So you have the team leader who's working through the case analysis, kind of, helping you guys. And then when it comes to the summary, typically what teams will do is they'll have one person do the summary of the case, split the team in half. One side does the no, one side does the yes. And then there's kind of a meeting of the minds. Which position are we going to take? Now, I don't dictate this. You guys are, MBA students, adults, working professionals. You guys can figure out how to do this. I can certainly give you some tips and tricks of what has worked and what has not worked. The case leader is a really critical job. You guys get a grade for it. I will have up probably early next week actually a feedback process. So you get points for it. Each case leader will be assessing the members of the team, and then the team will assess the case leader. And then I bring those together, right? And it's also a job because you guys know as managers, you need to evaluate your peers. So we'll have a simple like Survey Monkey online that asks a few questions, right? But that team leader role is fairly important. And by the way, when I'm grading you as a case leader, I'm also grading your engagement with me. Whether you guys like that or not. I do it really quite intentionally because I've had classes where people never ask me questions. And so this is my way of forcing you guys to ask me questions. And I think you will find that my feedback can be quite helpful, right? So at least once during the class, we're going to probably have some direct conversation when you're the case leader. Hopefully it's more than that, okay?
Question, do you say that that person changes after every case, so every week or whatever?
Yes. So we do 4 cases, but there's only 3 cases you guys have to read. So we're doing Tom's, we're doing Tesla in 2 parts. So you'll see Tom's, Tesla Part 1, Tesla Part 2, and Southwest Airlines. So you will have, if you guys have a team of 4, each person will do 1 case. If you have a team of 3, then one of your very kind team members who has time in their schedule, you know, or you can do it a little more informally and subdivide that role. But each week you should swap kind of who's the case leader, right? And then by the way, it kind of makes it in a way, like if you guys know that you're really busy at a certain point in whatever you're doing, or you're gonna be out of town, not that you're abdicating your work that week, but somebody else is a little bit owning, kind of finalizing the document, okay? The benefit, I know you guys have been in our courses enough, you know it's really hard to work in team projects. The commentaries we get about team projects, I know what you guys think. But this is the kind of analysis where you really benefit from each other's point of view, right? And, you know, and it's fun. It should be fun to work with others. As a student, again, I hate team projects. I'd much rather do stuff on my own. But in this circumstance, I think the teamwork is really important. So, case analysis, kind of digging, clunky, working with a lot of the frameworks, case summary, sort of bringing it all together with a point of view. Okay, so is that pseudo clear? And what I try to do is with the first case, I'm a little less, I don't know what the term is, critical, right? It's a learning process. I want you guys to sort of figure out how to do these types of write-ups. What's the voice? The writing in this is also key. So you guys are, I am recording this, and I think it's okay that I say this. This is not something where we use APA. Am I allowed to say that? Don't tell Catherine Marsh. Hi, Catherine. Case analysis doesn't warrant APA, right? You guys shouldn't be doing external research, right? All of these cases are historical. They're at a point in time that's in the past. I encourage you not to do contemporary research. Don't, trust me, I know this is hard, but don't go out to the websites and look at what these companies are doing today, right? We will do that after we look at the cases. But look at them from where they are at this point in time. Now, if you want to go out and, library, who's my library person? Veronica. I am a friend of the Brandel Library. Just Professor Hurley, remember that. You guys can get industry reports, right? So Tom's is in the shoe industry, the global shoe industry. Through our resources at the Brandel Library, you might be able to find a report about the global shoe industry or shoe trends. That I'm okay if you go and research. But what I don't want you to do is go fact-finding about Tom's. And then also, if you look at them today, they are very different than where they were at this point in the case. And it just kind of makes it, frankly, less interesting. So You can find industry stuff, but don't find company-specific stuff. What that means is you don't, the citation, the APA formats don't matter for this stuff, right? You guys are writing for the management team of these companies, which is me. I am the chief strategy officer of Tom's, then I flip my hat and I'm the chief strategy officer for Tesla, right? And then Southwest. You guys are writing to me as a member of the management team of these companies. So write in the third person, but write very realistically. These are not opinion-based analysis. Like, you personally may like or dislike certain things about these companies and their products and their mission and their culture and whatever. I don't want to see those sorts of things. I want to see the facts. Now, if you can connect what you think to some sort of fact, that makes it relevant for inclusion. Right? Like, if they've done something and they've had a whole bunch of good or bad press about it, that becomes a fact. And that can be incorporated into the analysis. So your writing really matters. And I'm a very kind of bare bones, direct writer. Write with bullets, good complete sentences, use data. The data's in the case. If you find some of those industry reports, use the data. You don't need flowery writing. And I don't specify number of pages, though I don't specify words. But the case analysis, you ought to be able to do it in 4 pages-ish. The summary, you might be able to do it in 2 pages if you're really concise with your writing. Okay? So we'll think about that. Lita.
Do you have any examples or anything you can post of how you want it to look like?
Kind of no. I could, but I don't, because then people take those as templates. But what I'm happy to do, like for the Tom's case, I'm happy to review a draft. And that's actually, so the case leader, whoever's going to be the case leader for Tom's, encourage you, a couple days before it's due, send me an email. Or we also have some, forums in Canvas that you guys can use. But I'm happy to review a draft. That I like a lot better because then I can be very, very specific and tell you guys what I think you're doing that's headed in the right direction, what I think is a little bit off. And then the second thing I do is when I grade it, I give you very specific feedback. And if I feel like there's a fairly large gap, I will let you resubmit it. So I might give you 15 points, say you're welcome to resubmit this.
Should there be things like a cover page or graphs, charts?
I love graphs and charts if they are effective. Don't necessarily need a cover page. I don't print. Typically, I review this stuff in Canvas so that I can annotate, but the cover page is kind of pointless. Although it looks beautiful and I appreciate the professionalism. Your final paper that you guys are going to do, that can have a cover page because it'll be more of a report-like document. So typically it's kind of like a memo. Graphs, infographics, charts, all that stuff is useful. Just make sure that it tells me something. It tells you something. It tells the reader. There's some things that we're going to learn about, and people will put a graphic and it's got like 4 words on it. That's not all that useful. Hand. There's a hand. Yes, Ron.
Sometimes you both the summary and the analysis.
Yes. Yes.
So we are using some sort of outside research. So do we need to cite it in the?
If you use like an industry report, yeah, cite it. Use a. That's where I like the APA citation format. So you can put that. And typically, these are so short that you don't need like a bibliography or a reference page. You can just put it at the end of the document. All right. And again, those are types of things where in the first Tom's case, I'll give you guidance. The thing that is nice about these cases, right, I've read them all probably, I don't know, 40, 50 times. I know what they say. I can quote what pages things are on. So if you guys just say from the case, and if the fact is correct, I know where it is, right? So you don't have to put the big long citation of the case. We're being liberal here, but it's helpful to know that it's from the case. If it's from some other type of a document, it's helpful to know that. All right, this is going to be the kind of the main part of your activity, right? And so what's going to happen is you're going to do the Tom's case, and then once you submit it, you're going to be in flight of doing the Tom's summary. While you start the Tom's summary, you're going to begin the Tesla analysis. Then it's going to get submitted. And you're going to have the Tesla summary, and you're going to start the second Tesla analysis. Okay, so Tesla part 1 and 2 are different areas of analysis, but once you've read the case, it's the same content. So there's a little bit of trying to make sure that, you know, we limit the reading. And the Tesla case has so many cool issues that it works that way, right? But remember, when you're writing the summaries align to the analysis, okay? And then we'll do Southwest, the same sort of thing, okay? So there's kind of a flow to it. Does it make sense? All right, and again, if you guys have questions, I am at your disposal. It works usually pretty well. Occasionally I get a little bit of confusion on how things flow, but it works pretty well. The other assignment, couple assignments that we're going to work on. So individually, you guys are going to do a topic presentation. This is that last bucket of kind of the modern strategy topics. You guys get to pick your topic. I have proposed a set of topics that you may pick from, but I'm very open to your proposal if there is a particular topic that you want to work on. What I will do is I'll ask you to select a topic. And if you don't want to select those, then you just need to reach out to me, because what I want to make sure is that your topic fits in the area of competitive strategy. I've had some people that wanted to do, you know, leadership topics, which there's a pinch of overlap between leadership and strategy. It just ends up depending on what your emphasis is, right? So if it's too much about like leadership principles and it's not connecting to how leadership drives competitive strategy, we either kind of refine your topic or it doesn't make sense for this class, okay? And the last week that we're together, you guys will walk through your presentations. We might do like a quickie. So I have you submit a video walking through it. And then in the 7th week, because if everybody did it, we wouldn't have enough time. I'd probably have you give like a 3-4 minute discussion of what you did. There might be some of the responses. I kind of, because this is a new approach with the hybrid, I'm still kind of trying to decide what we're going to do that last week. But the presentation, you'll put together a PowerPoint. You'll also do a video, submit it online so everybody can see it. Then you guys get to respond to one. But usually it's kind of neat to have a little bit of a discussion around the table, especially because some of you are going to choose the same topic, but take a look at it from a different lens. So by the time we get to our third kind of get together, I'll let you guys know. And it would be more of an informal conversation. Yep, so you guys can, if you click on this, there's a link here and it'll bring up a spreadsheet. And if it's a first come, first serve, right, Lita? So I have several different topics that I have proposed. And if none of these topics particularly gets your energies flowing, I'm happy to brainstorm a topic with you. Or if you have another topic in mind, you can propose it. Right? So all you have to do is go out, carve your name in here, and that's your topic. All right, and I'll check in with everybody. I think this is by the end of the second week. If you guys notice, one of the Harvard course packs that I set up for you, I don't know if you're there yet, it's an optional pack. It has some starter articles for some of these topics. And it's just, there's some articles that are really good to read. But that's one of the things that you'll be working on individually. The last two assignments, I'm not going to speak to them in depth because I'll come back to them at another point. We're going to do a simulation. We read some discussions about the topic of a balanced scorecard. Our simulation is about putting together a balanced scorecard. We're going to do that. I need to look at the schedule because we might do it in week 3 in class. We might do it in week 7. It's one of these things where I'm still trying to check the flow. I like to do it face to face when I can because you guys are, as many of you are here as possible. But since we can't require everybody to be here, we still might do it sort of offline. I just need to look at it. But it's normally not something I do till like week 6. And then your final project is going to be a paper. And there's a couple of moving pieces to this. So one is when we get about midway through the class, I'm going to ask you to think about a topic, what you want to focus on. Typically it's a company and an issue that relates to competitive strategy. Have you submit the proposal. It gives me a chance to kind of look at it, give you some suggestions, make sure the topic fits, make sure it's got enough kind of meat on the bone because some topics are too big to do in our time frame. Some people have these really amazing ideas, but they're just a lot. And I want to give you at least that input. Some people's topics are too narrow. So that will be due in week 5, and then your final paper will be due essentially a little bit beyond the end of the class. I think I give a couple of extra days into the next week. The timing of our class, the squad is really kind of nice because it gives a long spring break, actually, almost 2 weeks. So you guys have a plenty of time. And this last week of class, that's really all we're focused on because it's a pretty involved assignment. It's an integration of all the things that we've been talking about. That is an individual assignment, all right? And we can, again, brainstorm about different topics, different ideas. Some people have very clear things. Other people, it's a little bit blank sheet of paper. The thing I love about that final project is some of you may be able to do this for your own organizations. Some of you may want to do this and it becomes part of your toolkit, archive, professional portfolio. Because I've had some people that have done this type of assignment when they've been in the marketplace or in their own organization looking for an advancement. They've got this because it's the kind of thing that really represents this type of an analysis you might do in your company. So I design it with that in mind, so it's a fairly practical project. So those are our main pieces. Is that relatively, it's a lot, but there's a lot of moving pieces to this. So the teams are for your cases, and then the simulation we'll do in a team. Everything else, you can do them in the same team. If you don't like your team, that's fine. But I would recommend the same team. Makes it logistically a little bit more straightforward. Questions, comments? Dulling. Okay. Do you guys want a little quick stretch break? Why don't we take a quick stretch break because I want to come back and I want to spend about a half hour and talk about strategy as a topic. And then we'll spend the rest of our time doing a little bit of a case analysis. To wrap up a few logistics. Again, most of us are new to Canvas. You guys are learning it real time, just like me. There's a lot of cool things in Canvas. So make sure that, when you guys log into your homepage, it more or less looks like this, kind of by week. Each week I've tried to set up reasonably the same way, where there's our objectives, a little bit of an agenda if we're having class, log in, lots of instructions and information, the readings. So you'll see, if you guys see this little icon here, it means that there's a PDF attached. If it's not attached, I will tell you where it is. So down in our next week, this article you'll find through Brandel. Another article, this is going to be in your course pack, okay? And by the way, if you all are wanting some summaries, up in the course information, there is this Excel sheet which has all the assignments and all the deadlines. So if you print out one page, every single thing, I think. If you guys find an error, just let me know. Like, I've tried to cross-reference everything. The syllabus, frankly, is useless. I don't put a lot of content in my syllabus. Read it, browse it, but there's a lot more stuff here in Canvas, okay? And then you can get to the assignments over here if you're just wanting to look at them, kind of big picture. In the discussion forums, if I do this right, each of the cases has a forum. And this is a place where you guys can post questions. You can put things you're talking about as a team that I can see. You can't see each other, right? So that's a nice place that if you're like brainstorming on certain things, you're going back and forth, it's there. You can use things like Google Documents as well, but you can also use this tool in Canvas. It's nice if there's things that you want me to review as you're working along. Your case leader can say, hey, we've got some stuff out in the forum. Can you take a look at it? I have also been known to go into the forums and look at what the teams are doing and to say, hey guys, I think you might be missing this, or hey, here's something else. So those forums are accessible to you. If you want to know the people of the class, we're all here. And then you guys are going to put yourself into groups. So once you figure out who you want to work with, and I see several people are doing this already, kudos to all of you. I've set up 4 groups, maximum of 4 students. Decide who you want to work with. If there's any, need that I need to make to like switch things around, but you guys can kind of self-direct that, okay? The quizzes are in here. I think those are the big things. If some of you want to use the conferences, great. If you guys are looking for tools and tips on how to do webinars, and I got a number of different suggestions. But there's some good things in Canvas. If you can't figure anything out, let me know. And then all of your assignments are going to be in here as well. Okay? So it's somewhat organized, I think. I make minor adjustments when I find that students have had questions about things. And then there's a few of these modules where I've kind of bulk packaged some specific things. So if you want to get a little bit of a head start on the strategy topic presentations, the instructions are here. This won't be relevant for you guys. See? Some starter articles, blah, blah, blah. So there's a few of those in there that kind of bulk package things. You'll see that your final paper, I've got some things in here, various instructions, how to write thesis statements, some good stuff like that. Okay. And then FYI, if you guys are planning our next session together, Professor Patty Hurley, who is my colleague at Brandel, who kind of works with the School of Business, is going to come and talk to us a little bit about some things that will be useful in writing the final paper. A little bit about thesis development, how do you decide your scope, some of the resources that Brandel has. I work with her on a number of different projects, and it's always a great conversation. She is also a resource for any of you. So in writing the paper, If you all are looking for articles, because that paper is going to involve a little bit of research, if you're trying to kind of get started and figure out your focus, she's a great resource. She can also channel my voice a little bit because she knows the things that I really pick up on. Over a number of quads, we've taken papers and I've talked about things that I like about papers, things that are gaps with her. So she kind of has that understanding. So if you're looking for another source of input, and she's very willing to meet with you all, do webinars, do conference calls, help, just help in any way. So please feel free to engage with her. If you haven't met her, she's awesome. Patty Hurley.
She's over at the
She's in Brandon.
on one of the back offices there.
Yes. Like the first one, stairs, she's the first office. Cool. Okay. So I want to just spend a few minutes in context. I want to talk a little bit more about what is competitive strategy, how we think about it, what we care about, what we're aiming for, those sorts of things, and give you a little bit of introduction into some of the readings, okay? And I may have said this in my intro email, but for this class, so I went through, and what I've tried to do is find what we know as seminal articles, right? So again, these are decades-old strategic frameworks. There's a number of academics and business people that are leaders in this field of strategy. And so I'm giving you their voice, right? So textbooks summarize the stuff that those people say. But, and then they charge you $300. Why not read from those people directly, right? So you guys are going to read Michael Porter, a few other individuals that are really well known. These are not the only people who sort of write and think in this area, but they're some of the more dominant. Some of the articles are from Harvard Business Review, which are much more digestible. Some of them are copies from books. They're a little bit more involved. So, take your time to read them. But I think you should find the readings relatively easy to get through and very kind of everyday language. They're not as pictorial. They're definitely more concepts. But I put PowerPoints like this out for each of the topics. So some of the pictures and some of the frameworks and those sorts of things, I kind of break them down in a little bit more user-friendly. So please reference these PowerPoints each week. So I want to talk about this topic, what is strategy? And you're going to hear more about this from Michael Porter. This is the Pam Schilling Express Guide. Let me do this by way of some personal experiences that I had. So this is a fellow holding a box that says Casper. Do you guys know what a Casper is?
It's a computer.
Yes. From where? Yes, from Turkey. So Casper Computer has the #1 market share in personal computer sales in Turkey. So who are they competing against? Apple. HP. Okay. Have you guys ever heard of Casper? No. Does it surprise you that they sell more Casper computers than Apples and HPs and whatever? Okay. So how does that happen? It happens because the management of Casper figured out their competitive advantage. And it has to do with an understanding of the local market. And this is where cultural differences and buyer behaviors and trends and the economic conditions, a lot of external forces matter. Right? So they're a Turkish company selling to Turkish people. And that can actually matter, especially when you're in a very sort of small, very specific kind of economy. Right? And when we were there, we visited them. That's how I got that photo. I mean, this was like astonishing. All of us were like, what? You're joshing us. He's like, no, I'm not joshing you. The airline industry, if you read about the airline industry, which I was doing actually a paper for one of my classes at the fall a couple weeks back about the airline industry. It's a terrible industry. Very difficult to generate profits in the United States. It's not exactly a growing industry. 6 of the 8 legacy airlines have been in bankruptcy in the last 10 or 15 years. Like, this is not a place that is sort of the investor's dream. This is the trajectory of growth of passenger miles, which is a critical metric in the airline industry. It's a little bit of a hockey stick, not quite, right? It's going up. This is Turkish Airlines, also from my trip to Turkey. And if you learn about the airline industry, even in the United States, very regulated for a certain amount of time. In most international places, the airlines were owned by the government. And then they may have been privatized. So this is a few years ago. The picture may slightly be different, but one of the things that they shared with us at Turkish Airlines is that they were buying more airplanes from Boeing and Airbus than any other airline in the world. That might not be the case today because the political climate has changed a little bit in Turkey. But what they figured out is that they could be an international hub. Because there are plenty of places in the world that are very remote, but actually flying to Istanbul, which is like a 10, 12-hour flight, was a very central location for a lot of people going to certain places. And so they figured that out, and then they also figured out that certain levels of service and pricing and what have you mattered to them. So they're growing like crazy in a time when airlines are not growing. That's crazy. Then you think about all these companies that are trying to grow internationally. So how do you grow internationally? Where do you grow internationally? Do you guys know what this is?
Starbucks.
Yes. Do you know where it is? Why not?
It's like Asia, but it's hard to guess what city.
It's written in English. The menu's in
It's Vietnam.
English.
So they all look the same, right? So there are different ways to compete internationally. So you kind of have a one-size-fits-all, you're one way all over the world. There's another way where you sort of tailor a teeny bit to the local market. And then there's another way where you completely differentiate market by market. So Starbucks is in that middle ground. So you go into it, and I mean, it's clear that it's a Starbucks. When you start looking at the menu, and some of the unique drinks, you start to see differences as well. Because this is Vietnam, not this Starbucks, but another one I went to, I have never seen such beautiful French pastries in my life. Right? If you guys remember, Vietnam used to be occupied by the French. They've carried through a lot of the French cuisine. I mean, beautiful dessert. And it was a place where people were sitting, having coffee, like we do, but they were slowly enjoying these beautiful, delicious desserts. Also, it's the most expensive coffee I've ever had in my life. Very, very expensive, very high end, right? A luxury. And it's also very interesting because Vietnam is a coffee culture. They grow a lot of coffee. Coffee's a part of their life. And so they're very slow to enter Vietnam. And there's not a lot of Starbucks, unlike here, where there's one on every corner. So how do you do this, and when, and at what pace, and then how do you go? I mean, that's an element of strategy, because outside the United States, there's a tremendous amount of growth for U.S. companies. It's the same for companies based in other countries who are trying to come to the U.S. So how do you compete in a foreign market? If anybody wants to do your sort of topic presentation on that, it's a super fun topic. If you want to think about it for your final paper, very fun. And then companies are terrible at this. So Target, everyone's best friend, Target, went to Canada and failed. Yeah. You were just in Canada.
Yeah.
It's kind of like here, but
They used to have the sellers as well, which is exactly like a Target that failed as well, and they put up a Target with sellers failed. So
yeah. But you would not think that there would be enormous differences between the the US. Now the Canadians, my Canadian colleagues and friends are like, you're crazy, we're nothing like you. But they're very different buying habits. Like Canada is a bilingual country, English and French. So all the packaging of every single product has to be in 2 languages. That creates a lot of added work with what you're doing. You have to have a different distribution network, a whole bunch of stuff. So this stuff is incredibly complicated, and a lot of companies are terrible at it. And financially, it creates a lot of problems. And then how do you prioritize, right? So when I was in China, every single young person in China wants to work for the company Alibaba. You guys heard of Alibaba? Anybody know what Alibaba does?
It's like the Amazon of like the Eastern Hemisphere.
Something like that. Close. They don't sell as much stuff. They have a lot more like services, but it's the Amazon of, yeah. At the time, Alibaba was growing like crazy. Growth is a problem. So each incremental investment that you're making, you want to continue your growth. And if you don't do it properly, you can grow yourself out of business, right? Or you start getting way too broad, and then your focus is all over the map. So these questions start to really shape how companies think about strategy and their priorities and where they're focused. Some of it has to do with execution. Right now, you guys have taken many other courses, right? You've taken stuff in organizational behavior, you've taken stuff in finance and accounting, leadership, some of you may have taken ops. So strategy interfaces with all of those things. They have to work really, really well together. Because what some companies will do is they'll come up with these grand plans and their genius ideas, and then they have no way of making them happen. They don't have the right kind of people, they don't have the right kind of operations, they don't have the right kind of technology. So, part of it is the decision process, and then part of it is how you put it in place. And so when we think about competitive strategy, when you guys hear this buzzword strategy, it's a process. It's not a thing, it's a process. So it's a process of understanding what's going on today in our business and the world around us. It's a process of deciding where do we want to go, and some of it's our vision and our aspiration. And then how do we get there? Those are the actions or the initiatives, right? And that's the execution piece. So, people use this buzzword strategy like it's this big fancy thing. I mean, it is crucial for a lot of organizations, but it's just a process. It's a very analytic process, and it's a very creative process. And on top of it, you're trying to plan for an unknown future. Then, in doing so, we're trying to figure out all these how questions. We have other participants in the industry. We have opportunities in the economy and the marketplace. We have all of the different functions of the business, and we want to make sure that all this stuff translates into better financial results, because that's how the company is rewarded. If we increase our profitability, we create initiatives that represent growth, our stock price is going to go up. If you're doing this outside of the for-profit sector, you still have financial metrics. North Park as a university, we have application volume. We have new student starts. We have retention rates, right? You're a nonprofit. You have funding, either through your fundraising or your grants, or through, other sources. You may have clients that you serve, right? You don't have to be a for-profit company to have some sort of financial and market performance. It's just going to be tailored to whatever business that you're in. So these things matter because companies are trying to progress, whether they're trying to get stronger, whether they're trying to deal with their competition, or they're trying to get this competitive advantage. And ideally, what we want to do is be distinctive, right? So, these guys at Apple, they've done a pretty good job over the years of being distinctive. I have, I think, 5 of their devices. Either that or I'm a lemming. I'm just following the herd, right? But there's clearly something based on their market performance, whether you like their products or not, because there's a few people that are still using the good PC world versus the Mac world. But there's a distinction, right? The Apple means something. And by the way, they're able to charge a price premium, which is why some of us may not embrace their products, right? So this matters. And it matters because you can earn higher than average profits. Or you can, if you're a fundraiser, it's easier for you to raise funds, or you can raise more funds, right? So, I got my degree, my graduate degree, from a university that I think by all admission, it is much easier for the University of Chicago to raise funds than North Park, right? Simply because of the positioning. It's easier for Harvard and Stanford to raise funds than the University of Chicago by way of their alumni and their positions and their brand position, right? So you make it difficult for rivals. That's one of the things that you're trying to do. So it keeps people out of your industry, or it enables you to sort of make greater demands in the marketplace to generate more customers, more business, what have you. So that's the thing that, as you all probe the 3 companies that we're going to look at, Tom's, Tesla, Southwest, they're very intentionally selected because you can think about what they do that is different from their competitors or their rivals. And each of those 3 companies has very, very strong bases of rivalry in their industry. They have strong, powerful competitors, right? So how then have they set themselves apart? If they have, if you think they have. And that's up to you to figure out. So do they do what other companies do but better? Do they do things that other companies don't? Do they just attract people through like brute force or creativity or cleverness? And the other thing that is very critical about strategy is not doing certain things, right? So I don't teach accounting much anymore because I don't think I'm as good at it as other people who have an accounting background, right? I mean, I have a degree and I dabbled in it. It's sort of my thing, but I'm not as good at it as somebody who works in accounting, right? So I don't have a competitive advantage, right? So I'm going to say no to teaching an accounting class, right? I'm able to do that. Companies can do that too. There's certain things that they shouldn't be doing. And whenever you guys see in the press about companies that are having trouble, you can think about these things. And some of them are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing. That's why they get in trouble. GE right now, you guys probably know the company, General Electric, lots of trouble. CEO, not necessarily fired, but was requested to transition, Jeff Immelt. Stock price slipping. And one of the things I think the market has been punishing General Electric for is that their businesses got way too diversified. And so what are they really doing? What are they doing that they shouldn't be doing? Right? And the market forces become very powerful behind that because they're a public company and people take their stock.
On the other side of that, could you also say, as far as kind of trying to incorporate strategy into that, they strategically didn't have the right leader to lead the company under that? Because it was Jack Welch who he diversified and did really well for GE. So maybe strategically their current CEO wasn't the best choice.
Yes, and no. I mean, the CEO is not the only one, but the CEO is what we call the single neck to choke. I mean, ultimately, I mean, you know, GE is a huge company, and you know, Jeff Immelt is not the only person making decisions. But at the end of the day, an executive is setting the vision for the company. And sometimes those executives are not able to rally the troops, or they're not able to prioritize or make decisions, right? I mean, I've not sat in the boardroom with Jeff. I know people that have worked under Jeff. They said a lot of positive things. But some of it, you know, when a company starts to have troubles, CEOs have to react very quickly and start making tough decisions, right? So you're right, Justin. I mean, he just has many super great qualities, but for the direction that they were going, he just maybe wasn't the right person. You could also say he was the sacrificial lamb.
He was Jack's predecessor.
He
protege, right? It
was.
down to 2 individuals, and they were groomed over a period of time to take that spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's it's actually very special, and we're not gonna dive too much into leadership, a little bit, but GE is very special because their whole kind of way of running the business is that they've got very robust succession planning. So you've got a CEO in charge, and they've probably got 5 or 6 people running different business units. Any one of them could step in, and every one of their CEOs is coming internally. So when Jack retired, Jeff Immelt and about 5 other people, and then they narrowed. And the 5 other people left GE to go be CEOs of other companies. Home Depot, Boeing. It just tells you like the bench strength of those. So it's sort of like if any of you are football fans, it's like having an NFL football team, American football, right? And you have a quarterback and your backup quarterbacks, you got 5 of them that could potentially win a Super Bowl. Right? That's only a dream. We won't talk about the Bears, but that's what the Philadelphia Eagles are hoping. I'm kind of a football fan, so it's a big deal, right? So along this journey, when companies are thinking about their strategy, they think about what they do and how they do it, and then they think about how they make money, right? And this is actually something that at times can be a little bit deceiving because, you know, some of you that use these lovely mobile phones, Apple makes a ton of money off of selling these phones, but they also make a ton of money off of the apps and the iTunes, right? And other things that are kind of pay as you go. And the way that companies set up how they generate their revenue and then how they earn their profits can really make a difference in the marketplace, right? So if you remember a few years back, satellite radio became a thing, and you paid for radio. My parents have this because my parents drive a lot. They like to listen to 50s radio. I know, cringe like I do. You cannot get this on public radio. You have to pay for it. But that's their thing, right? So they love it. If you travel across country, you might love it. I find no need for it because if I want to listen to the music that I want, I just connect my Bluetooth to my iPod here, and I play my favorites list. So there's the value proposition and how we make money. Lyft and Uber, they make a lot of money on this surge pricing, which taxi cabs don't have. Former Blockbuster made a lot of money out of late fees. Right? So that was not an accident, by the way. So we think about these things, and ultimately what we try to do is we try to create value to consumers, and we try to make money. Earn more than it costs us. That's a very simple, basic equation. Surprisingly, though, a lot of organizations have trouble with this, right? But if you create something that customers value, then usually that profit equation will work out unless you're just not smart about the way you're pricing things. All right? Blah, blah, blah. I don't need to go through that. So all of this stuff is important, right? We need roadmaps, game plans, formulas, all that good stuff to guide us, right? So it's sort of, akin to a class syllabus, right? Whenever we set up classes for you guys, there's some general takeaways, right? There's some key principles. And then each of the things that we do week by week is kind of the sets of activities that hopefully get us to the end of the class where those principles have been delivered, right? That's what companies are doing. And, if you guys think a little bit about the organizations you're a part of, probably throughout this class, you're going to be asking yourself, do we have a plan? Do we have a roadmap? When I went to business school, I was still working, and ultimately one of the reasons why I left my job is I started learning a lot about these kinds of principles and just feeling like my organization had enormous gaps. And so my way of solving that was going and becoming a consultant where I would help companies put this stuff in place, right? So it also causes you to look a little bit critically at kind of the world that you're operating in. So think about some of these things as we approach the class and some of your assignments. So when we approach these questions, right, you guys are going to encounter 3 different businesses that have a lot going on. We want to ask questions, right? And then we want to go seek out the information that helps us directionally answer those questions. And we're not going to, it's not a math equation, it's not perfect, it's a little bit murky, but in reality, in business, we have to ask a lot of questions and make sure that we've gotten grounded enough, solid enough to be able to make a decision. But we also have to be comfortable that we're probably not going to have every piece of information we need, right? And then you have to really dig in to try to make the best sets of decisions possible. And knowing, what your management team is capable of and aware of and what they know and what they don't know, and experience plays into some of this, right? So there's a skill. And some of the, organizations that I worked with that were very challenged, they weren't necessarily as skilled at this. And even as a consultant, I'm cautious about the role of consultants because I think at times a lot of companies just outsource their strategy to their consultants. And then unfortunately, they don't have that skill internally. Right? That's kind of crazy. So for you all, partially that also means that in 7 weeks you guys aren't going to be experts at this. It's something you got to build over time. But by the way, you can be closet strategists, armchair strategists. When you hear about news or if you're reading the Wall Street Journal or you're looking at things, you're thinking about things in your organization, think about how would you deal with that? How would you answer these questions? How would you evaluate it, right? And you can practice some of this stuff over time. And ideally, you'll find yourself in places where you might get a chance to do some of this work, or you can do it for your own department. You may not do it at the company level, but you can do it at the department level. Okay, let me put up this chart. So if you were sitting in an organization and you were involved in strategic planning, which by the way, have any of you been involved in your organization's strategic planning processes? Allison, what did you do? What was your kind of role?
A number of times when I worked at another university, responsible for my own department as well as for the campus. And then even here, when it comes to strategy, financial aid strategies they use for recruiting students and trying to retain them with scholarships.
Yep. Christy.
We do usually like a 1 year plan.
Yeah.
Plan strategy, and then we
certain markets if they want to close certain.
Yep. Cool. So if you guys are not directly involved with this, by the way, you're students. There's nothing better than finding the people in your organization who do this stuff and say, hey, I'm taking a class. I'd love to talk to you about our process. A number of you work here at North Park. I mean, I don't know with kind of our interim president how much of this we were doing, but when President Parkin was here, we did a strategic plan every couple of years, and I'm sure it was revisited periodically. But also, it doesn't hurt, as you're networking and meeting with professionals, just ask them what they do, because different companies do this differently, and it's very interesting. But the process kind of generally, and these are some of the processes that I've been a part of, you often have an existing strategic plan, right? Unless you are literally a company that hasn't started yet. Either because you're a new company or your company just hasn't been disciplined in this way. But a lot of times you'll go through and you'll basically say, where are we? What was the plan and where are we? And how is the business doing? And you evaluate it based on some comparable metrics, right? How are we doing, right? So are we doing okay? Are we doing great? Do we have problems? How big are those problems? What's going on, right? And then we start the new planning process. And many times we'll do some data collection. So we could do some internal interviews, talk to people in our organization. We can do some customer surveys. We can do focus groups. We can talk to our suppliers, whatever feedback we want to get. We may do some scans of the environment that we're working in, depending on our industry. So we get, again, that external perspective. And then we could benchmark. So all the financial metrics that you guys may remember from your accounting and your finance courses, you can benchmark those against other companies. If you have customer service operations, you can benchmark those against other companies. If you have product development metrics, you can bench them, right? So you get this kind of set of data by doing research. And then you figure out what direction you're going. So you may have an existing kind of vision, mission, goals, and at certain times in companies, phases of evaluation, they might step back and say, is this still the right direction for us? Do we need to make any tweaks here? And then maybe there's new goals that are going to be set. Those tend to change more frequently. Then you can think about themes, right? What are we trying to, do? What are, the impacts we're trying to make? What are we trying to serve? What are we doing? All that stuff. And from that, we can set our strategic direction. And it's not as if there's math here. It's a little bit of judgment, right? It's like, we're a university and we sit in this urban setting, and it might be great if we had more connections to the communities around us. So we want to think about how to bring more people into the campus and how to send people on the campus out, right? These are themes, right? And then you start to figure out, okay, well, what does that mean? And what do we do because of it, right? And it might result in some programmatic changes, some scheduling changes, some new admissions programs, the way that we speak to donors. It can result in a lot of different initiatives, right? That is very critical in the thinking, but it's not exactly like a thing that happens because of a formula, right? It's a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth, a lot of kind of connecting the dots, right? And reading the tea leaves, so to speak. And this is where organizations can really differentiate themselves, right? So, you put it all together, you get people to approve it, and then part 4, you actually have to figure out how to execute it. So it's like, what are we doing? Do we have to hire new people? Do we have to change the way that our business is organized? Do we have to put new programs in place? Do we have to stop doing certain things? Should we financially restructure the company? There's a whole bunch of things that an organization might do because of this. Now, most companies, this is not super dramatic. It's kind of like we're doing all this stuff. It's good. We're heading in the right direction. What's on the horizon for the next year, 2, 3 years? For some organizations, they're facing more critical junctures, and they really have to make significant transitions, right? So it just depends a little bit on the organization and kind of what's going on. But it's a process, right? So make it very methodical, all right? But also don't expect super clear answers. Like it's just not something that comes out of whatever, all right? Okay, so that's all I want to say on that topic. Now, you guys are going to read some articles about, vision, mission, what is strategy, good stuff. That's all going to feed into what you're going to analyze for the Tom's case. All right. So, in strategy, we got to know what we're trying to accomplish, because otherwise, everything that we're doing is just kind of throwing stuff against the walls. But ultimately, like, what are we trying to aim for? And that stuff really comes about from vision and mission and the goals that are set upon it. Now, when you guys are reading, what I want you to pay particular attention to are the frameworks, the criteria, the ways that things are defined, right? Because then you have a basis for analyzing the case. Or you have a basis for analyzing the business situation, right? If you just read it as a narrative, it won't be that helpful. All right. So when you're doing this, have that eye that I'm looking for approaches. So one of the things that you can think about, take a few companies that you interact with on a daily basis in your life as consumers. You guys are all consumers. Try to find their vision statements and their mission statements. Go out to Google, type in the company name, vision statement. Go out and type in mission statement. Type in values, company name and values. You probably won't find their goals because those are generally very internal. You may not find their vision because a lot of that is not publicly communicated sometimes. You might find their mission. And then read it and ask yourself, I'm a consumer of this company. Is this what I would have thought their mission is? Or their vision? And that gives you, and then if you look back at the reading, it's like, okay, well, how would I evaluate this to know if it's good or if it's bad? Is it a good mission statement or a bad mission statement? And what makes that, right? So that's kind of what we're ultimately trying to decipher between the readings, and then we're going to apply some of that stuff to the case studies. But you guys can also, do a few of these activities on your own that are not like super involved, right? Questions about strategy? Seem interesting? Yes, I can tell. Okay, lovely. So if it's okay with you guys, I want to do a little activity, okay? I want to give you all a little practical experience with some of this stuff. And we're going to do this by way of a super short case and some discussion, right? But you guys may want to have notebook paper and all that good stuff, just to take notes. Okay. Okay. I'm going to use a business scenario. Okay. So hopefully Madeline and Rasha, you guys can see this. So I want to talk about this company. And then we're gonna walk through a little bit of a demo of how we analyze a case. All right, very light content. You guys are going to be reading a lot more of the data. I'm going to talk it through, tell you some things. So we're going to help a company called Good Life Trade, and we're going to help them evaluate a future strategy for growth. So if you were working with this organization, they would tell you, look, our growth has slowed, and we want some recommendations from this very intelligent group of MBA students to figure out what we could do to drive our growth. All right. So there's some background about this company. So they've been about 25 years old in an industry that's very interesting, very specialized, very niche. The fair trade industry, fair trade products. And they started this industry actually themselves. They kind of brought this concept of fair trade into the United States by first importing fair trade coffee. Does anybody have any questions? Do you guys know what fair trade means? Nick, what does it mean?
It's setting up relationships with people usually outside of the country and where the economics are fair to the people that you're buying from and not exploitive.
Yes. Specifically in what kinds of countries? Where?
Africa,
Yes. Why Africa?
bad economy.
Bad in what respect? What is it, Kristen? Third world countries. Developing economies. We call them emerging, third world. Right? There's a bunch of different terms. And imagine trying to buy from a third world economy. What is the circumstance you are likely facing if you are the seller in that third world economy? Who's your buyer?
But there's a giant power differential.
Yes. If you're selling coffee, who is your likely biggest buyer? US, and specifically who? Starbucks. Folgers or General Mills or whoever makes Folgers and coffee in the cans that are sold in the grocery store, right? So these are multi-billion-dollar companies. They have huge amounts of power. So what do they do to the sellers of the products in these third world countries? Yes.
I mean, they basically tell you how much they want and for what amount, and if you want to compete, you agree to their terms, even if they're not favorable to you.
That's right. And so as the supplier, the grower, the farmer, whatever I might be, what am I likely doing because of this?
You probably be compelled to accept, because how do you walk away from a deal like that? But
Yes.
You cut corners, or what do you do to be able to meet that demand?
That's right. So we cut corners. We might pay ridiculously low wages. We might not have the most safe labor practices because we can't afford them. We might hire, right, people below age, which in the United States we have laws preventing. But, I got to run my business. So this power differential became problematic because of society's feelings about it. And so a certain industry developed to deal with this. right? Built around fair trade, fair and equity, and to sort of find a better way for business and society to interact in harmony. Okay? So by just telling you guys that, what do you start to develop as an understanding about a company called Good Life Trade? What do you think they care about? What is it?
But in Good Life Trade, I'm care about
Holistic and sustainable business relationships, supplier relationships.
Yes. People. You think they care about profit? Yes. But also, they care about their impact in the environments that they're working, right? Which happens to be these emerging markets, right? So they have a different purpose. They probably have a slightly different strategy than a purely for-profit, what we would consider like a consumer packaged goods company. Okay? So even in one simple sentence, you can learn a lot. And then also, you can ask 10 questions from that one simple sentence. And then the key is, because you guys are going to be reading these cases, the key is to go into the case and find more information, right? So you may have a question. It's like, we'll dig into the data, dig into the background. You don't know the definition? That you can look up on the internet, okay? So more about this company. They grew very, very successfully. In the last 5 years, they grew from 20 million to 35 million. That's a pretty good growth rate by all measures. They had a certain amount of net income, 755K. If you guys want to do the math, you can figure out what the margin is. But they've come to a place where the rate of growth has slowed. And so this is alarming to them. And if you go through and you do the analysis and you extract the gains from price increases, extract that out, you kind of normalize it, their growth is only at the rate of inflation, which for many companies is not ideal, right? That means 2 to 3% growth. Depending on the organization, most CEOs won't keep their job with that level of growth. Maybe, depends, but it's usually not sustainable. So they want to understand what they should do about this. They know that they've had some external challenges, right? So one of them is that after the recession, there were some things that maybe they didn't do because the recession forced some, fiscal restraint. And also, they have a lot more competition. So when fair trade started, they were kind of the only game in town. Today, on last count, maybe there's more than 300 companies that sell fair trade coffee. That's problematic, right? So what are you guys thinking? What would you want to know, given some of these additional facts that are being revealed? What questions if you were talking to the executive team?
of those 300 companies, how can Good Life Trade differentiate themselves, make themselves different?
Yep.
I mean, they're all offering the same product, but there must be something that Good Life Trade can do to differentiate themselves from their competition.
Yes. Or what are they presently doing? Right. So there's two parts. I'm going to break your question into two pieces. One is, what are they doing now? And then the second part is, okay, once we sort of get a sense of where everybody stands, what can they do better? And, because this is a pretty crowded market space.
And there must be something that they're doing right, more of their like expertise, like over a period of 5 years, there must be something that they do really, really well. But maybe haven't leveraged that.
Yes, exactly. So that's one of their, the final points there. This is a really well-known, in their industry, you guys know, but it's a really well-known company. And everybody knows the leadership team because not only are they running this company, but they're out there advocating for the fair trade industry. They're kind of the voice of the industry, right? They do keynote speaking, they consult with other companies, they do a lot of consumer education. Whoa, I mean, that's kind of cool.
So when I read that, I kind of almost thought, well, what business are they in?
Oh, that is an interesting question.
Are they in the coffee business, or are they in are they an association that promotes?
That's a great point.
Because are they actually around to run their company? Are they off at all these conferences?
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, seems like a worthwhile thing, but maybe someone else should run the company for them.
Or
So-
maybe they need to have an arm of the company.
Okay. So we, strategists, call this hypothesis. Right? Maybe some of their growth challenge is coming because they're really distracted and they're doing other things. Maybe they need to commercialize this. Maybe they're so good at it, maybe they need to commercialize it. Maybe because they started this industry, they haven't yet developed an industry association, so they're taking on the responsibilities that would normally be driven by an industry association, and maybe they need to create an association and get out of the industry business. All great brainstorms, right? And so this is what happens when we're evaluating a business scenario, is you start to come up with ideas, hypotheses, and we have to figure out if they make sense or not, or if there's other things that make sense. And that's where we have to start to look to the data, right? And sometimes we have to make a little bit of a leap of faith, right? So we're going to ultimately come up with some growth recommendations. This is what you guys know now. What else do we need to know? What would be helpful to get some context for this business?
I'd like to, one, their financials, more in depth on their financials, and then maybe like their top 5 competitors to see how they're comparing. Is everybody experiencing this slowdown due to the recession? Is it just them?
Yep. So if you're going to look at the financials, what would you guys want to do? Now remember, this is not a finance class, but we strategy people like to span other disciplines. What would we want to look at in the financials? Their cash balance.
Cash statement, cash flows.
Statement of cash flows, right?
How they're managing their expenses relative to their net income, their revenues.
Yep.
What their debt ratio is.
Okay.
The financial ratios.
Inventories. Inventory turns.
I want to know their assets because you talked about being a recent recession, and I'm assuming they're saying because of the recession, maybe we haven't invested in our company recently and we held back. But since so many new entrants to the market, are we just not, like our machinery, are we just not even competing at the same level? Are we just super inefficient with our inventory? I don't know.
Right on.
I was thinking more about their like values and the core values and the mission and stuff, so that our suggestions will go far from what they
Yes.
want to do.
Yes. Okay. Hold that thought. Let me wrap up the financials.
Oh, well, financial, I was thinking more forward looking, like what are their forecasts?
Yes. So when you guys think about analyzing the status quo, the present of the company, right? Think in categories. Okay. So it's always useful to analyze the financials. You've got an income statement, you got a balance sheet, you got a statement of cash flows. Each of those is going to tell you something. It's going to tell you the operating margins. It's going to tell you the level of investment. It's going to tell you the debt ratios, how much debt they have, if any. It's going to tell you, you can calculate ratios to look at inventory turns. Now, the financial stuff will give you direction about potential areas where the company is succeeding falling short, right? So if their margins are off, why? Have they hired too many people? Have they not been thoughtful in managing their expenditures? If their inventory turns don't work, are they not fueling the right products in their portfolio? If their leverage ratios are off, maybe they've taken on too much debt. If they haven't invested, they could be missing out on some of the new emerging areas, right? So the financials are diagnostic. Okay, we got a few healthcare folks in here, sort of. You go and you get your blood pressure checked. If it's a little high, there's a variety of reasons, right? It sends you, it creates more questions. Okay, so you guys can look at the financials, right? Then we have something like the mission, the vision, whatever. That's really important because it tells you a lot about the company. And this is a mission-driven business. It has a social impact mission because they're focusing on creating, financial equity in emerging markets. That's very, very important because there are things that they may do which are not purely profit-driven. Every company's mission and vision are important because it shows you boundaries, right? So there's things that you don't want to do that are way out in left field, okay? The future, you want to understand what the company's plans for the future are and how they've evaluated them, how they thought about them. Some people just do stuff and they think that it's a good idea, but they haven't really thought about how it connects to the whole. Right? Or there's, by the way, people's pet projects. So we can start to learn a lot. What else would you guys want to understand about this company?
Well, when you're talking about mission and vision, I would want to know, especially when they talk about things like trade. You're saying that I would want to look at something like employee engagement scores or employee turnover rates.
Yes.
See just how are the overall employees feeling. I want to know about their corporate social responsibility plan. What have they done and has it accomplished? Just to get a feel that are they even meeting their vision and mission?
Yep. So there's an alignment here. We have a vision, we have a mission. Are we living it? They could be, very caring about fair trade, but maybe they're not using practices that are environmentally, friendly or sustainable. They don't have a recycling program. They care about, so fair trade is a lot about the employee relationships and the relationships with the farmer. But if you're not treating your own employees great, if you're not an employer of choice, best place to work, it starts to get off balance, right? So, those are things that you can really learn about. And you can see if the company is kind of walking their talk. And then what do you do about that? Because consumers, by the way, you guys are the consumers of this company. This is a B2C business. So you can buy their products. So when you have a company that's very mission driven, what do you do as a consumer? How do you guys think about a business like this? Do you care? Why do you care?
If I'm going to go through the trouble of buying fair trade coffee, I'm going to look. I mean, if that's something that's important to me, and I don't just want Folgers or whatever, I'm going to look at what they're doing and if they're actually living up to what they say that they're going to do. So, as a consumer, as someone who's looking at it, I'd want to know what consumers think. Is there a reason why they're buying or not buying their product, or maybe they're buying from someone else?
Yes.
Particularly probably because it's more expensive. So how do you substantiate the higher price?
Aha!
Yeah.
That's the thing. What do you guys think? Are their products cheap?
No.
Have any of you guys bought fair trade products? Are they, I don't know, price?
Starbucks is fair trade.
Some of it is.
I don't think it's that price, not necessarily. It depends, I would say.
Yes. But conceptually, how do we perceive it?
I would perceive it as higher priced.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know, there's some psychology behind this, right? That you're contributing to something more than just the bottom line of a company, so maybe you're not quite as price sensitive. Quite as, you're maybe not going to pay $40 a pound for a thing of coffee, unless it's, the Blue Mountain, Jamaican, whatever, if there's coffee there. Coffee people? I'm a coffee people.
I've heard of it, but not that much of a coffee. I'm sorry that I.
There's some really expensive coffee out there. Teas are worse than coffee, by the way. But you can, if you're living this the right way, if everything's lined up, you ought to be able to drive, $1 a pound. The other thing that some of these companies will do is rather than selling it by the pound, which is 16 ounces, you'll get a 12-ounce bag. So it's like $9.95 or $14.95 for a 12-ounce bag as opposed to a pound, which ounce for ounce you're paying a premium, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do that help drive up your profitability if you're kind of executing, right? And you can find out this stuff from the company and ask them about it and what are they doing, right? Veronica?
I have another thing that
Yeah.
I would like to know. It doesn't specify where they operate and like where they have locations, because in different countries, consumers want different things and demand different things.
Yes. I don't have as much of a perspective on this as I should. I'm not clear on how like corporate social responsibility is internationally.
I mean, we talked about this in another class. Sweden and America, like it's a lot of differences.
Yeah.
Fair trade is very like common where we're from.
Yeah.
Recycling, like stuff like
Yeah.
that. So consumers demand that.
And I think that's an interesting factor because you've got some places where this is the norm.
Yeah.
And then in other places where it just doesn't make sense. And then it kind of depends. I've had, we have a variety of students for China. I've traveled to China. Sometimes I feel like none of this stuff matters. And then I'll find pockets of individuals that are like, yeah, this is really important. And I think it's somewhat generational a little bit. Like, I don't know, if you're...
In the United States, millennials care much more about CSR than, like, I'm Generation X. And so when I was younger, corporate social responsibility really wasn't a thing. You never really bought stuff. You don't really care. The first time I ever heard about anything that made me actually care was when I was a teenager, when I heard about Nike and all of their sweatshops. That was the first time, like, I was like, oh, that's kind of not cool. But before then, you didn't know that, and you didn't really care to know about that. And so now I'm trying to be more mindful, but I know that working with millennials, like that is very much something they care much more to a greater degree than I care about.
That's right. So one of the things we want to understand, this is where we start wearing many hats. Again, we strategists, we wear many hats. We're closet marketers. Right? We're a little bit of finance people, right? We start asking, who are our customers? People that are buying from us. What is that segment? You want to understand that. And you often have, in a business like this, a primary segment that you're talking about and targeting to, and then you might have some spillover segments. So, if you read a little bit more about Good Life Trade, you probably discover there are people that principally want to support fair trade. And they want to buy products that are fair trade, right? Then you have other people that want things where they know they're like eating things and, lotions and stuff, right? They want to know where it came from, the source of it, and how it, kind of feeled to me. I want to know that. And that's where a lot of the organic movement is coming from and, some of the local sourcing and those sorts of things, right? And then you get a third segment of people that like things that are cool and hip and in, right? And it just so happens that in the present day, coffee is very cool and very hip and very in. And apparently they're, if you do a little reading, there's like this third wave coffee period that we're talking about. So if you guys have, I don't know if you guys have seen any of this, but Starbucks, they're creating these roasteries. Have you guys heard about this, Justin? What?
I don't know much about Starbucks, but I just know like
Yeah.
the local roasters and being able to go straight to a place that roasts the coffee there on site,
Yes.
grinds it, brews it, serves
Yes.
it.
They literally source their own beans. They have a roaster in the, back closet. And it's much more about the experience of the coffee, right? So Starbucks is introducing these huge, giant spaces, and they're roasting the coffee on site, and they're brewing it with these, not percolators, but it's okay. I'm into coffee, so I do a lot of reading about this. That's why I like this discussion. So that's a huge trend. And it just so happens that people who are really hip and into coffee, they're willing to buy fair trade coffee. And then you're talking about people that really are willing to pay a premium. So what you're investigating here is not only what segment the company is targeting, but also what are some of the trends related to coffee. Now, what else would you guys want to know about trends? If you're thinking about, what does coffee compete with?
Tea, soda,
Tea.
Alcohol.
Alcohol. Combine the two, that's ideal. That's why there's a bottle of Bailey's sitting next to my coffee maker for nights like tonight. No. What else? What else?
Food.
Potentially food.
Hangout spaces.
Hangout spaces, right? Because coffee shops have now become meeting spaces. So there are societal trends, behavioral trends. As Allison's talking about, the different generations, right? I mean, I'm a little older than some of you. My generation, we think a little differently. You get some of my undergrads, they're an entirely different generation. And I don't know, they're not even the Ys anymore. There's like another whole group of this, like the 17, 18-year-olds. So what's going on? And how do people, we are all living off of laptops. So even though you may think coffee and technology, they have nothing to do with each other. I am the living, breathing truth that they are highly connected. Because if I need to get connected, I search for Starbucks on my phone, on my app. Because if I need to send an email very quickly, it's the quickest way to find Wi-Fi. I know it's crazy. You got to live my life in a day. So they are connected because technology has made us much more mobile. And, Starbucks is everywhere. Right? And where am I going to go? Starbucks or a McDonald's? Depends on probably who you are. Depends on my mood. Right? Do I need a coffee or do I need French fries? Right? So what if you have, if you've got kids, if you're traveling abroad? I've eaten plenty of meals at Starbucks because it felt to me like the happiest place to eat in my circumstances. So there's a lot of important trends that we can investigate. So we're talking about a lot of different things that relate to key pieces of information that you all want to go out and gather related to the case. Right? And some of it is tied back to what's the question. So our question is, we need to set the future direction. We want some ideas for growth. So we had a couple of ideas for growth. What other ideas do you guys have? Good life trade. We don't know everything. How could we come up with some brainstorm? Let's brainstorm for a second.
Just throw it out there because it seems pretty obvious. Maybe one of those 300 companies, they can acquire one.
Could acquire a company. It's a possibility. Yes.
It'll.
Yes, Christine.
Are they mostly retail and like a store or a grocery, or are they selling to Starbucks.
Good.
That kind of thing. So, see who their current customers are, and is there opportunity to either expand into the other area or to grow into different buyers?
Yes. So their distribution channels. So right now they operate retail, a small handful of retail locations and online. They could potentially do wholesale. Oh, great. That's a brainstorm, right? Egla?
They can branch out and sell other fair trade products,
Ooh.
maybe like tea, that's similar to
Yep. So we can look at what's in their portfolio. They might be selling a few other things right now, and then we can continue to add to that. Right? And you can, this is where, you can brainstorm a little bit. They can add some more food products. They could add non-food products. Right? They could, there's lots of things in local economies and emerging economies that are interesting products. Okay, I like that. What do you think? Brainstorm?
They can identify what the highest earning coffee competitor is doing that they aren't doing.
So sometimes your competitor, either through marketing or service or packaging, and then it becomes a question of, do you kind of copy it because it's something that your consumers value, or do you try to do something a little bit different? But you have to inventory what your competitors are doing. But your competitor might have picked up on something that's really interesting that you just missed. I don't know what it is. Maybe our competitor has pop-up shops, and they, make coffee and hot chocolate and tea, and they open them up, and they have, whatever, they send out messages on Facebook. Like, that's a really cool idea, right? It's getting a lot of press. Maybe the news media comes and is like, oh, so-and-so, here's their pop-up shop in downtown Portland, there's a big crowd, right? So they're getting a bunch of free media. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's a really interesting idea. We don't want to do that exact thing, but maybe we're missing out on some of that marketing. We're not taking advantage of some of the marketing trends.
Given that.
Yep. Yes.
Maybe do something like a point system. Maybe their consumer is more millennial. They're on their phones a lot. Something like an app.
Oh, yes. I love my Starbucks app. I'm trying to see how many free drinks I can accumulate. Which my husband just is like beside himself. He's like, you have 2 coffee pots in the house. Why do you need Starbucks? Right. So you have some type of a loyalty program, right? You got a bunch of competitors. Why not have a loyalty program?
Promotion or something to make the product to be well recognized.
Exactly. All kinds of stuff on social media that you could do promotionally. I was talking to another individual, because I use this with some of the interview prep I do, and they were like, you could go out and interview some of the growers locally. Like, go into the community, interview those individuals, tell their story, create a whole ad campaign around that. Like, wow, that's a really good, and social media is perfect for that, right?
Maybe if they realize, like after what Egla said, maybe if they realize that their other companies are doing things better, maybe they should just stop selling coffee and start selling other things that if they can't gain a competitive advantage, maybe it's time to cut your losses.
So you want to know how your standing is, right? Your situation. And if things are good, you may, but there also may be things that you've been doing that it doesn't make sense to do anymore, right?
And I think a perfect through the app promotions, things that have already been mentioned, is a collection of marketing data. I mean, you have to start asking your customers, what do you like, what don't you like, what would you like to see us do? And once they have that data, it's proprietary to their organization. It can be really powerful. And then, of course, future data gathering too.
Yep.
Kind of like a consumer survey, like at the end of the app that you use, once you buy a drink or something, like how did we do today?
Yes.
I think for me, I like questioning the question itself. How do we drive growth? I think necessarily growth is a strategy. I think it's the consequences of good business practices and good business intelligence. So I think in GLT's case, I would ask them, what do you want to be? Do you want to be the champion for free trade coffee? Do you want to be the number one selling coffee in America or wherever marketplace is, or in this microcosm? What do you want to do? And let's put together the pieces so that growth is a consequence of.
Yeah. So Justin asked a good question, and I'm going to paraphrase slightly. Why do you want to grow? If I'm talking to the management team of Good Life Trade, why do you want to grow? What does growth mean to you? Because not all growth is the same. I mean, there are definitely organizations, they want to grow their bottom line net income. And they want to do it for, the purpose of increasing shareholder wealth. Probably that it helps themselves too, like individually, right? But it doesn't hurt to really question, why do you want to grow and what does growth mean? Because sometimes you get very different understandings of the objective, right? And even, thinking about a ton of different consulting projects that I did, we would do that with our clients. It's like they'd bring you in. So way back in the day, one of my projects was to launch the smart card the Chicago Transit Authority uses, the pre-Ventra. So whatever issues you have, not the original card. And they wanted their question, a little different than this, but their charge for us was to outsource the operations to get that card in the marketplace.
Like India?
They did not know. They were like, so we kept asking them, like, what are you trying to do? What do you want to accomplish, right? And what they wanted to get people off of paying money, like cash, and then they had paper tickets. They wanted, remember that?
I remember.
Yeah, they wanted to get out of that business. It was like, well, why do you want to outsource? Well, we think that's the fastest and the cheapest way to do this. Trust me, it was not. And we had to redefine the question. They just wanted what we found out they really wanted is they wanted a PR moment. The president of the CTA wanted a PR moment. He wanted to be in an underground L station with media and cameras announcing that this new smart card was in use. Because a couple of the competing transit agencies in New York and Washington had done that. He was little. So I was like, why don't we do a pilot? Let's do a pilot. We'll do a soft launch, and then we'll have the media in. Boom, problem solved, right? Complete. So you're on the right track. Like sometimes you got to ask questions because what's being said isn't really what's going on. Now, let's go to sort of the purpose of all of this. You guys are going to do this as a class assignment. My questions are not that vague. Interpret them literally, right? Because we're doing this for a class assignment. But what we're doing, you guys are going to read these cases. You're going to be asking questions. You're going to look for data. Now, I've prompted some questions, but in your discussions, you want to kind of challenge each other. You want to, encourage, have the cases printed out. Right? If you guys need to, I don't know, go over to Brandel. They can print them out. Try not to do it on your computer because I think they're really hard. But it's like, what are we talking about? What does it say? What's the fact base? Okay? And make sure that everybody in your team is speaking about their perspective. Okay, so your case leader, one of your jobs is if you've got somebody who's a little quiet or isn't as proactive, bring them in, right? Make sure you're including everybody on your team because you guys really want to put solid thinking together. So the other thing, are you guys going to have all the information about these cases? Absolutely not. You're reading what's written. You don't know everything. So you're going to have to put certain stakes in the ground. So what I really look for is logic of thought along with some connection to evidence. Right? And then some sort of connection to the topic, the framework. Right? So keep that in mind as you're working along on these. And then, the analysis, like I said, you're going to have a couple of very specific questions. Some of those questions align more to your readings than others. The analysis is, in my view, a little more straightforward. It's like excavating. Here's the question, let's go to the case, let's find the information, let's put it down. The summary is a little bit more thoughtful, right? So we just talked about good life trade, not a lot of facts, me telling you guys a little bit of information, you guys asking for some questions. And then if I say to you, okay, just based on your hunch, what do you think the 3 things are that good life trade ought to do to grow revenue? Let's assume that that's the right. How do you decide? There's several different people throwing out ideas. How do you decide which 3 ideas are the best ideas? Okay. Pros and cons. That's a good framework, a good structured approach. Here's an idea, here's the pro, here's the con. Okay, that's one method. What's another method of prioritizing? How do we analyze?
Talking through it, asking each other questions.
Close, but I'm looking for kind of one more dimension.
What's the investment?
Possibly. Okay, so the investment, let's talk.
Feasibility.
Feasibility. So bring that up to a higher level. What is that? It's a criteria.
It's a criteria, like how much money and how much time, how much resources.
Yes. So is it the only criteria? Okay. You got to have a couple. Right? So you guys need to sometimes think about what is the basis for your assessment or your evaluation or whatever answer you're giving. You need criteria. So for good life trade, potentially as an illustration, one criteria, does it align to the mission? It's a little bit vague, but does it align to the mission? Does it distance them from the competition? Is it financially impactful? Is it feasible? 4 criteria. So we could take all these ideas that you all have thought about, brought up, and others, and evaluate them against those 4 criteria. And then you can be as qualitative or quantitative in evaluating those criteria as you want, right? You can do a high, medium, low. You can do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can put numbers in it. The financial return, the financial impact, you could do a net present value, you could do an ROI, you could do a market share, you could have 2 or 3 metrics, right? But my point is, as you all are taking positions, think about the criteria that you evaluate against. And my sense is that none of the teams are going to use the exact same criteria. That's okay for our purposes, right? If we were the strategy team working for Good Life Trade, we would agree on the criteria together. We would define that. We'd probably have a lot of brainstorming, a lot of discussion, like Veronica was talking about, and we would come out with some criteria, right? Your team should have that, right? So you're going to get a summary question for Tom's, one for, each of the 2 Tesla cases. It's like, answer yes or no. I'm in support of the pro position, I'm in support of the negative position, and here is why. Right? This, by the way, is how executives need to hear information. And it also shows the depth of the analytics that you've done, and it shows that you're using a framework to approach your work, which again is something that executives like. And you get into the language of what these business leaders need to hear, right? And then ultimately, you guys are the strategy team. You're not the decision makers. You slide it to them. You say, this is what we recommend. This is why. Okay, great. Now you guys can earn your salary and you can go decide if, you think this is the right direction, and then let us know. But that is also a process of influence, right? So a little bit of what I want you all to think about is the communication mechanism. And we use this kind of approach of, here is the answer, and this is why. Sorry, my pen is very light. So for each question, when you're doing your analysis, you can apply the same technique. So here's the answer and here's why. And often the why is in the evidence. Sometimes the why is in your logic. The why should not be your opinion.
What assumptions?
Maybe.
If we start out saying, this is based on the following assumptions.
It depends.
Just to kind of set up the reader so they know.
Yes. So it depends a little bit, Eileen, because the nature of these case studies, you guys are given, like the Tom's case is a little shorter than the others. You have a lot of information. So I think my sense would be, if you're thinking that you're going to describe assumptions, that's a great place to check in with me, because I might say to you, I don't know why those are assumptions. Those are actually facts. Right?
So there's going to be a lot, because like in this, it seems like to answer the question, you're going to have to make a bunch of assumptions. It doesn't seem like there's a whole heck of a lot of information there. But our actual case studies are...
You guys have a lot more. Okay. Like the Tom's case, I think is 6 or 7 pages. It's a little bit longer. 9. There's pictures. There's pictures on those pages. The other 2 cases are longer. And they have a lot of charts. They have tables. They have financial information, descriptions. So I think the way that I often think about it is, when you are evaluating the present, you should not necessarily have assumptions. If you are talking about the future, you may have some assumptions. And that's not an absolute, but that tends to be the way that I think about it.
Then why over here it should be the answer for those questions? Like we have 4 answers, like we're gonna have an answer and we just have like 4 questions or 4 answers for those. And the why should be not an assumption, saying
might be a fact. So it could be, the question could be, and I can't remember all the questions I asked for Tom's, but, it could be, does Tom's create a competitive advantage based on its corporate social responsibility? Got to do a little investigation of what corporate social responsibility is. You guys can look that up. Have most of you taken the multi-sector convergence class? I kind of assume that if you haven't, again, that's the benefit of the team, and also it's fairly quick. So the answer might be no. And here's the 3 reasons why. They're doing this, but they're not doing this. These are the dimensions of corporate social responsibility. I think they have gaps. If you read the case, they talk about this. They don't mention this. So if I just look at the facts based on the case, I'm not seeing this. Right? It could be yes, because this, and this, according to the case. Right? Now, this is where Eileen's point could be, I also based on observation of the company, having visited their stores, we see this, so if you guys know, if you know Tom's, many of you drive a Tesla, and you've flown on Southwest Airlines, if you drive a Tesla, let me know, I could use a ride. You can bring in your observations, but you want to state it as fact. And that there's a little bit of maybe acting in there, but you don't want to state it as, in my opinion, blah, blah, blah. So if you state it as an observation can be a fact. Yeah.
My question is, can we assume that you know these things when we write it? Like, I know in Tom's case, the mission or mission is not like stated in the case, but if we find it, can we assume that you know it when like right at the back?
Yes.
Yes, we'd also brought this. If we find this on the website or.
Yes. So it's a great question. So you guys can all assume that I know these cases really well because I am the chief strategy officer of Tom and Tesla and Southwest. But for your purposes, assume that you're writing to someone inside the company, right? But yet you're still doing the work, so you have to explain certain things. Now, if you find a piece of information, right, you can handle it in a couple of ways, right? You can put in your write-up, this is the statement of the mission, and then you answer the question. If you read that statement, it has these dimensions, it has these elements. If you look at how they operate their business, it's following the mission, it's not following the mission, right? But if you find the mission, I would figure out where and source it. If you find it on the company's website, just say on the company's website. If you find it, if you interviewed an employee of the company, find it, source it. So that helps know that you didn't make it up. And by the way, that's also just a good habit. Because if you guys were doing this in business, and you were giving this document to an executive of the company, they would still want it sourced. They may not care about the APA, but whatever fact base you're using would want that sourced. Because no executive wants to go tell the board of directors something and then have somebody come back and go, your facts are a bunch of bunk. Right? So it enhances your credibility. I mean, my consulting work, all of our client deliverable, we never used APA. I never heard about APA until I actually started working at it. My MBA program, we didn't use APA. I don't know. But we would, every single PowerPoint slide that had external data or internal data, we would make a footnote on the slide. So it's a really good habit to get into because I think it's very practical. Okay, that's a lot. I think that's what I wanted to cover tonight. So kind of some key action items for all of you. Make sure you get into your groups. There's a couple of individuals who are not here tonight or online. Make sure to reach out to those folks. Pull down the one-page Excel sheet that has all the assignments and all the deadlines. Put those in your calendar. Make sure that my design of our approach is that, and I think I said this in my email, you guys are kind of reading the articles on the front end of the week. When you start reading the Tom's case, even though you're really not going to be analyzing it, start reading it, because a good twice, 3 times read through is going to help you a lot. And when you read it, you can look at the questions for the case analysis, and you may want to jot down your own notes, and then when you get together with your team to talk about it, you're bringing ideas to the table. And then you all may want to, once you form your groups, look at the schedule, and if you have things, sort of plan which week you're going to be the case leader. Right, and that's some people have predictability, other people, things pop up. But that way you guys can kind of figure out if there's timings that work better than others to be the case leader. Other than that, have fun with the assignments. If you guys have questions, my preference is that you post the questions in Canvas if it is related to the class, because that way I can answer it and everybody in the class can see it. If you email me directly, which I'm happy to have you do, a lot of times I have to take that second step and go out and post it and answer, because I want, if you have that question, other people likely do. The other thing I will tell you guys, I guess a couple things logistically. Sometimes you may email me a question and I do not directly respond to you, but you will see an announcement come out from Canvas. That means that I have actually read your question or comment. But rather than doing 2 things, I'm doing 1 thing. Also, if you email me for some reason and you don't hear from me for a day or 2, please send me an email again. I'm not ignoring you. It's just I have these kind of windows in my schedule where, I'm doing something. Like tomorrow, I have the entire day sort of tied up from like 8 a.m. until 9 p.m. So I won't be on my email tomorrow. And then I get kind of a first in, first out mode. So if you sent me an email and you didn't hear from me, feel free to email me again. I actually appreciate it. And if it relates to the class, sort of broadly post a question in Canvas. Okay?
There are some emails on Canvas too that we can, do you prefer that or your personal?
I think
discussions.
For expediency, if you actually send it directly to my North Park email, I think it's just easier for me to reply to it, because I have to log into Canvas, whereas I can reply on my mobile phone. For some reason, I don't know, just as a thing. So if you guys have something very specific for me, probably a direct email works best. Don't leave a voicemail at my office. I'm never in my office. I mean, if I'm in my office, I usually with students, I don't check my phone. Your email will get a much faster base of attention. Okay? All right, everybody. Thank you guys again for coming out on a chilly night. If you're pre-planning, week 7, we'll have a fun evening. Usually I have some food here, some beverages, make it sort of a fun discussion. So, if you can't be here our next class, no worries. You can carve out the time. Awesome. I appreciate it.
We need 2 more people in group 1 if there's anyone who goes to meet in person. We're both located near campus.
Anybody else in the group?
Yeah, I think I'm actually in a group with 2 other people.
Do you want to meet in person?